Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Kenny, and we're talking about Return to Condor Heroes. We're on the last 5 chapters of the third volume. There are 4 volumes in total, so we have 2 more episodes of 5 chapters each. This episode, we're covering chapters 26 through 30. A lot happens, but the bare bones sort of description of these chapters is Yango loses an arm. He spends his time recovering in the presence of the Divine Eagle and learns a one-arm fighting style using one of the swords of Master Dugu, and he steals the baby Guo Zhang again. He returns to Tuan's insect, finds Zhao Longnu mortally wounded, and the two marry before a bunch of very shocked and surprised Tuanzhen Taoists. They return to Ancient Tomb Sect, but they're once again poisoned, just as they're trying to cure Zhao Longnu. And they leave Ancient Tomb as Tuanzhen Sect is being crushed by the Mongols, and the whole mountain is on fire. And they return to Passionless Valley among a retinue of heroes, a very big retinue of heroes. And that's sort of the bare bones description. I guess we can get right into chapter 26, which is Divine Eagle's Heavy Sword. Again, in this chapter, there's the whole battle at Tuanzhen Sect with Zhao Longnu, Yin Jiping, the Taoist who raped her, dies, or he begins the process of dying, we should say. And the 5 masters come out of seclusion. Yango and Zhao Longnu reunite, and then we have a flashback. There are a lot of flashbacks like this throughout the whole book, actually. We have a flashback where Yango explains to Zhao Longnu what happened to him, or at least the audience understands what happened to him. And in the flashback, he loses his arm after Guofu cuts it off, and he returns to the valley where he meets the Divine Eagle again, and he sort of becomes like a disciple of a deceased master named Dugu. He finds a cave where there's 3 swords, and he selects a black sword with I think smooth edges. I don't think it's actually sharp, but it's really, really heavy, and it's supposed to be built for like a very simplistic, basic style of fighting that Dugu says he used up until the age of 40 or something. And so then, because he's with this Divine Eagle, the eagle has some residual kung fu from the master that it I guess was the master his pet or his disciple. Is that exactly clear in this chapter, Kenny?
I don't think it was said. I think it was just they probably were friends, I'd say. Like, uh,
A companion.
yeah. It was sort of implied that Dooku basically secluded himself after he roamed the martial world and became undefeated.
Yeah.
And then he sort of secluded himself on this mountain, and maybe found the eagle, and then became friends. And because it was said that or at least Yang Guo's theory for why the eagle was sort of doing martial arts with him and was his idea of playing, basically, right? Because Dooku obviously must have played in a similar way with him in the past, using his sword skills, and through these sort of actions, Zhang Guo was able to deduce.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so they was able to deduce the correct method of using the heavy sword.
Yeah, and I think what it said was he used the eagle as a sparring partner, Dugu did. So I think it was like through that he got some of the kung fu, and he was able to act as a surrogate teacher to Yanguo,
Yeah.
for Dugu's style. And so, but then Yanguo leaves the eagle to sort of tend to some of his pressing matters in the martial world. And at the end of the chapter, he goes back to Zhang, where he sees, he learns that Huang Rong had twins, and he's about to sort of deal with Guofu. And so those are the bare bones. We should get into it. But Kenny, just so you know, you're a little bit low on volume. I don't know if there's any. I can hear you fine, but it just sounds a little low.
Okay. I'll check that. Yep.
But I don't know. What are some of your thoughts in this chapter, and what are some of the points you'd like to talk about?
I kind of I really appreciated the sort of exposition on the sword demon Dooku.
Mm-hmm.
Just the whole it is the description of his sort of journey towards becoming a master was very sort of overbearing and arrogant. So yeah, the description of how he used like a light sword to begin with, and yeah, the story of his conquest, and then when he used a flexible sword and he accidentally killed someone, and then he sealed that for good, and then when it comes to the heavy sword, it was just like he sort of. I thought it was like sort of very vivid imagery there on someone's like journey towards mastering the sword and ending it. Yeah, just like going back to using sticks and branches as his weapons, because he is now so skillful that he no longer needs a weapon to show off his sword skills. And I just thought that was a very nice sort of technical aspect of the martial arts in the novel that I appreciate.
No, and I like how it's sort of the level of skill is so good that like he doesn't even really need a sword. It's sort of like and you see this in Yangor where there are many points in the story after this because he's fed a bunch of snake bladders or something, and his internal energy, I think, it's unclear exactly what causes it, but his internal energy improves tremendously. I think because of the type of snake bladder he was given, and so even without his arm, he's able to. The sleeve of his arm sort of can be used with his internal energy to achieve great things, and so and I feel like you really start to get glimpses of this profound level of power that many of these heroes are gaining access to, whether it's Yangua or Jin Loon is also kind of reaching these heights too, and it's I don't know, it's something that really separates this genre from like I guess a kung fu movie. Do you know what I mean? This is sort of the level of martial arts that you're dealing with when you get to the heights of a wuxia story. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because I can't remember what point it was, but there was a scene where Yang Guo basically bends Guo Fu's sword into like in three parts by using his sleeve. Yeah, and that's just like a demonstration of how sort of profound and powerful chi is in sort of martial arts novels. It's an unseen force that can allow an armless man to use his sleeve to bend metal. So it's
Well,
yeah.
and I like that they explain it because one of the things, if you watch just the movies, which are great, I love the movies, that, but like sometimes it's not always clear what the principles underlying everything are, and in the books it'll clearly explain things. So when you see a movie where the person's sleeves are functioning as a weapon, or they're unfurling their robe or sending threads, there's this whole concept of being able to use your internal energy to turn something that's soft into something powerful, and that's very clearly explained. I don't know if it's over the course of this chapter, but over the course of this and upcoming chapters, I believe it's addressed in a little more detail than it has been, and that sort of window into oh, that's why that happens in the shows and in the movies is always I don't know, I find those bits of these stories particularly interesting. But
And
yeah,
I
and I
also wanted
love.
to
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say like yeah, and I also sort of like the little training montage Shangor had of like in the river, in the waterfall, in the heavy rainfall, trying to keep standing upright and knocking boulders and branches and trunks or whatever out of the river flow, which is it's one of those things which is always very, I say, typical in Asian media. Whenever they're training, like the waterfalls always like feature prominently, like either as a place for people to meditate under to maintain their focus, or they try to build their strength up by slashing upwards against the water and that sort of thing.
Well, it was a cool scene. It also gets into sort of the perseverance idea that I find very appealing about a story like this, especially when there are a lot of characters in this book that are crippled in various ways. Yango just being one of them. But it's, I don't know. I don't know if we got into it last podcast because I don't think it was confirmed in the story, and we didn't want to talk about it until it was sort of supposed to really be confirmed. But the whole idea of this late in the storyline cutting off your protagonist's arm is, I don't know, the first time I encountered this which I think was on a TV show, it was shocking to me. I was like, wait a second, this main character just lost his arm? Well, surely that divine eagle is giving him medication that's going to grow his arm back or something. Like clearly they're not going to just have him have no arm. And so and he does overcome it, but it's an enormous setback for somebody who is reaching the levels of power that he was attaining at that point in the story. And it kind of, I don't know, it kind of is like a setback that he has to work through, and it develops his character. It makes him a little bit more accepting of certain things, I feel. And it ultimately maybe leads him in a more profound direction with his own martial arts, because now he can't he can't rely on two arms like everybody else does. Now he has to be really clever with his style.
Yeah, and I think we have to mention as well that most of the martial arts he's learned at this point in time are sort of the softer martial arts that rely on skill and dexterity, both arms obviously to pull off properly. Like his swordplay is never like strong and dominant. It was like always sort of described as being flexible and coming from tricky angles type of thing. And I don't know, his other sort of boxing styles is also the same thing, because obviously the Ancient Tomb sect, their martial arts were designed for women, so it's more on the soft sort of feminine side, as they say in the novel. And even his like finger flicking skills and the bamboo flute swordplay thing that Huang Yaoshi taught him were all things that were skill rather than power, and we're sort of seeing a transition here. Like he chose the heavy metal sword and is using it's sort of now trying to brute force his way essentially, because the mantra that was described on the sort of the stone carving said that from simplicity comes power, basically, right?
Let me see. It says heavy sword with blunt edges. Simplicity brings superiority. Before I reached the age of 40, I used it to roam the entire world under heaven. He's a real Dooku's like, he's a real character, this guy. He's got these really bold proclamations on his because it's not just that sword. There's three swords and they all have something like this. And you just so I think the first one is the sharp sword, and it says fierce, aggressive, and able to penetrate any obstacle with it. I competed with the heroes of the Northern Plains during my teenage years. And then he has the I think there's a sword that's missing. That's the flexible sword, and he says flexible sword of the purple rose. I used it prior to the age of 30. With it, I accidentally wounded a righteous man. A weapon of doom. I abandoned it in a valley. And then we get to the heavy sword. And then there's the wooden sword that's somewhat rotten. He says, after age 40, I no longer relied on weaponry. Bushes, trees, bamboo sticks, or rocks, all could be my swords. From then on, I achieved great progress and slowly reached the realm of overcoming the sword without a sword. And it's just this, I don't know, it's really fun. It's fun, and it's also, I don't know, it's a cool sort of martial arts.
I really like those passages, yeah.
It's it's got like a little bit of like bravado, but it's also anchored in like the fact that the guy probably was justified in feeling that way.
We sort of see Yang Guo transitioning now into the power phase, and I think sort of Dooku's age 40 onwards sort of passage might sort of hint as well towards what Yang Guo's future is also going to be like when he will no longer need a sword once his kung fu is profound enough. And I think the fact that Yang Guo sort of found this, I guess, tomb would be the best way to describe it. This cave, this mountain, this inheritance of sorts, really sort of helped him, or will help him on his path as a martial hero. Because without it, I think he probably wouldn't go to the heights that he will eventually do and become the hero that's sort of renowned across the ages type of thing. He would have probably been a decent martial artist. The one-armed swordsman of mild fame, rather than being the hero Yang Guo.
I would agree. And also, I guess there is sort of it is interesting to wonder how much of it is Dooku transmitting this to him, and how much of it is just Yang Guo inventing. Because It's
Well, the only thing that he took from that was from what the bit about from simplicity comes superiority, and he used that as well as sparring with the eagle to sort of come up with his own style. It's like, well, basically, if I stab you fast enough, then it doesn't really matter what skill you use, right? That makes that. I mean, like his thought process makes perfect sense. Like if you swing the sword fast enough, there's nothing they can do about it.
it's a very very efficient uh, approach because I think he points out there's like a lot of eccentric movements and sort of elaborate stances and stuff, and he sort of says, maybe that's not all necessary. Maybe I can just sort of cut to the chase and kill the person in one swift stroke. So it's a it's sort of like you sometimes when you peel back, you sort of peel back some of the style and just focus on practical efficiency maybe, but also that just the amount of, it's clear too that the amount of internal energy that he's using for this style is tremendous because he's able to use this sword in ways that are difficult to comprehend.
Yeah.
But yeah, so at the end of the chapter, he returns to Zhang and he's kind of still toying with the idea a little bit of revenge against Guo Jing and Huang Rong to a
I don't
degree.
know. I think he wants revenge against Guo Fu.
No,
now.
he does, but he's like angry at them too. Like he seems to be bringing them back into this anger that's brewing towards Guo Fu over cutting off his arm.
I think it's okay with Guo Jing, but I don't think it's okay with Huang Rong and Guo Fu because I think he knows that Guo Jing is he is a strict father and he is willing to teach, but it's Huang Rong who always shields the daughter from any sort of lessons that would help her improve as a person, kind of thing. Like, she spoils her.
Well, especially in this scene because he overhears her sort of going to the father. And this is sort of the end of chapter. So why don't we do the transition to the next chapter? Because this sort of crosses the threshold into that, and I don't want to confuse things. But we're getting into chapter 27, Fighting Strength with Wisdom. And this chapter I like a lot. This is the one where Huang Rong sort of... basically, Guo Jing decides that he's going to cut off Guo Fu's arm to get some sort of justice for Yanguo over the arm taking. And Huang Rong stops him and sends Guo Fu away, and just says, run back to Peach Blossom Island. And she decides to go and see her off. And while she's doing that, she encounters or she sees Li Mochu when she's going to buy some apples. And Li Mochu has her baby. So she follows Li Mochu into the woods, and they have a confrontation, which sort of turns into a battle. Huang Rong puts the baby inside a sort of like a formation of trees that I think she wraps a bunch of cane things around the nearby trees and makes it difficult for Li Mochu to get the baby. And as she's fighting Li Mochu, she uses the apples to absorb Li Mochu's needles and under her gown, and tricks Li Mochu into piercing herself on the needles. And then, because she sees that Li Mochu has developed an affection for the baby, she asks her, does she want the antidote or does she want to save the baby instead? And as she's giving the antidote to Li Mochu, Yanguo takes the baby. He returns and takes the baby and decides this is his compensation for his arm loss. And then he returns to the tomb where he sees the fighting at Chongyang Palace, and then that connects us back to the events of the previous chapter. So to get back to that sort of opening scene that we were talking about, that's where Yanguo sort of overhears Guo Jing reprimanding Guo Fu and threatening to take off her arm. And I think, like you were saying, that moment is pretty clear to Yanguo that Guo Jing is a upstanding, sort of he has no ill will towards him, but he's directing it towards Guo Fu and
Huang Rong. Definitely, yeah.
But yes, I know. What did you think of this chapter?
I find it quite interesting just because you have Limosho with the baby and she thinks that it's Xiaolong Liu and Yang Guo's child still. And she's like she's spending all of this effort to protect the baby from Huang Rong, who's the actual mother. So
Well,
I thought it was a little bit of a slapstick moment there as
well,
well.
I thought it was, but I also thought it was really interesting sort of use of both characters because Huang Rong, who's always sort of scheming and intelligent, sometimes maybe to her own detriment, uh, she doesn't even let on that this is her baby. She lets Li Mocho think that she has no idea whose baby this is, and she says, "Oh, whose baby is that?" And Li Mocho says, "Oh, it's very shameful. This is a big shame of my sect." And again, I just love these moments when Li Mocho is so judgmental of other people. But it's also, I don't know, it's interesting because we see that Lee Mocho really is developing an affection for the baby, and it seems to be bringing out a side of her character that you don't see anywhere else in the story, and Huang Rong is able to exploit that. And again, I just love the whole thing where she puts the apples in her gown and the needles hit the apples, and then Li Mochu stabs her own palm on the needles. That's like a very
And that's basically a Huang Rong thing to do, though, isn't
yeah
it? Given the ending of Legends of Condor
yeah
Heroes. I
yeah
mean,
exactly. It's very in keeping with her whole approach. There's like a plausible deniability with her tactics, but she still ultimately is responsible. Um, and and so yeah, I thought, I don't know, it's not only a cool chapter, it's a cool start of an interesting part of the story where Li Mocho and Huang Rong develop a little bit of an understanding. They're still clearly enemies, and there are still clearly unsettled grudges that Li Mocho is going to have to contend with. But there's this period of time where she's basically traveling with Huang Rong and her retinue, and I don't know, it's just kind of interesting to see her in this mix of other heroes. Uh, and again, that does get a little bit into the following chapter, but I don't know, for me that's the most entertaining part of the chapter is the bits with Wang Rong and Li Mochu. um and also I do like the way that I don't know, I like sort of the way that time is being dealt with in these chapters, where we're sort of now reconnecting to the part of the story before the flashback. And and it's just kind of, I don't know, it just seems to move in an interesting way. But I don't know, was there anything about this chapter that I didn't bring up that you thought was worth mentioning?
oh, yeah, I just want to point out that this is a chapter. Yeah, this is where after Yanguo steals the baby, he steals the 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 red horse. It's like a special horse, the red-blooded horse or whatever it was from Guo Fu. And this is also where he uses his sleeve to like bend the sword in three parts before running off. Um, and it's interesting because Yang Guo obviously has the chance to take revenge for Guo Fu taking his arm, but instead of like taking it out on her, he decided to take the baby and just destroy her sword. And I think this is also where Hongan points out to Guo Fu that if Yang Guo had wanted to kill her or take her arm, it would have been easy for him because he can look at how strong he is. He can
Yeah.
break your sword with his sleeve.
And also, I guess something I failed to mention is in this chapter, when he goes back to Chongyang Palace, there's a big battle with the Mongols and Jin Lun there, and in the course of having there's sort of like a Nigong match between him and Jing Lun, if I remember, and as it's becoming clear that Jin Lun might be having some difficulty, his disciple Huodu flees, and basically it's just like, well, I'll I forget what he says, but it's like the worst possible
No,
excuse.
I think it was like Daoba and Hordo like, oh, we'll protect the master, and then somehow Hordo pushes Daoba in front, going, "You go, and I'll go look for help or whatever."
Yeah.
Except he just runs
He's
off.
like, I'll run back to Tibet for help, or I think it was something really. It was a very feeble excuse. Um, and D'Urba Yango decides to release him because D'Urba is so earnest in his dealings, and this is another situation where he's talking to Bet and Diango, and I think he's still mistaking him for his
The
martial
reincarnation of his
brother.
yeah, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but also Jiping awakens after he's stabbed himself earlier on Zhao Long Nu's sword, and Zhao Long Nu speaks openly of her rape, and Yin Jiping throws himself on the swords. I don't remember if it was the seven masters, but at least seven. There's seven Taoists in formation, and I think he spears himself on their swords.
Is it on the Taoist swords or was it on the Mongol
I thought it was a
swords?
Taoist, but I could be mistaken. I
Okay.
thought it was the Taoists. So he meet and there's sort of this interesting thing Zhao Long Nu's been having where she sort of is on the one hand is feeling merciful toward Jiping, and then sort of it seems to be alternating back and forth. But in the final moments, he ends up taking his own life, and so there's a sort of justice is achieved there. And following this, we get into chapter 28, which is wedding festivities. And in this chapter, Yang Guo and Zhao Long Nu are married in front of a picture of the founder of Tuanzhen sect. And they go back to ancient tomb where they get their wedding attire, and they find some love letters from the founder of Tuanzhen sect to the founder of ancient tomb sect. Zhao Long Nu is dying from an injury sustained during the battle at Tuanzhen, and they learn that over the course of a conversation that Ouyang Feng was the one who killed her master, and that that they might, and he gets the idea of using Ouyang Feng's pressure point reversal along with the chilled jade bed to help heal Zhao Long Nu. And they begin to do that, and that's around the time when I think Huang Rong and Li Mochu sort of set out to look for Guozhang, and I think they do it by following the trail of the red horse that Yang Guo was taking. And there's a lot more that happens in this chapter too, but it's a pretty, I think it's a pretty meaty chapter. But I think the crucial thing is the marriage, and then the fact that they let me see, is this the one where they get poisoned? Did they get poisoned in this chapter, or was it the chapter after that Yang Guo and Zhao Long Nu get poisoned?
I can't remember what poison that Xiaolong had in her first, because that's the poison they were trying to cure using
Well, she gets two poisons.
Jade.
She gets poisoned from the palm that Li Mochu uses, and then she gets poisoned from the needles that Guofu throws into the coffin.
Ah, yes, okay. The Li Mochu's palm strike only happens after Li Mochu leads the other martial heroes to the ancient tomb sect. So
Yeah.
that
That
yeah.
is in this chapter, so that's also important. So when so on their way, they met up with a bunch of other heroes who were trying. So I think they meet up with like Wu Dunru and his brother, and Wu Santong, and Ye Lu Qi, and Wan Yanping. There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens, and they all sort of end up traveling together to ancient tomb. And Li Mochu is going to lead them inside the tomb, but Huang Rong stays outside because of her recent birth, and Li Mochu realizes that she can just pick these people off on her way in, so she's going to sort of lead them in to their dooms, and she ends up, I think, setting off like a stone slab that traps them, and then she goes off to sort of confront Zhao Long Nu and Yang Guo herself, and she catches them at sort of a crucial moment and disrupts the healing process. And I think it's something weird where like they actually complete the healing process, but then it gets reversed because of Li Mochu's palm, and then it gets really super duper reversed because of a sequence of things that happens, beginning with there's a fight over the Li Mochu wanting the manual, so Yang Guo traps her in a stone coffin, and then when the other heroes escape and start walking towards the chamber, out of caution, Yang Guo and Zhao Long Nu hide in a coffin themselves, and the group mistakes them for Li Mochu, and so Guofu walks right up and throws two needles into the coffin and hits both Yang Guo and Zhao Long Nu. and so it's sort of
And I
this.
still want to point out that Yang Guo technically knows how to cure all of Li Shou's poisons.
I think so. I think the issue with Xiao Long Nu is because of the extent of her injuries.
Yeah.
I think there's something like they're dealing with. She has some kind of weird meridian blockage, if I remember, that they're trying to deal with, and then on top of that, the the way that she was hit with the palm during the curing process made it worse, and then the timing. It was one of these things where I think it's sort of like there's a very elaborate explanation for why no matter what they do, she's going to die in a certain number of days, and I think there's a little bit of sort of the the writer wants it to be this way, so that's how it's going to be.
Yeah.
For plot
Yeah, no,
um,
but it's just funny because they made such a big deal out of Nemo Show's poison manual at the beginning of the story, and now that it's possibly relevant, it's no longer mentioned again.
that's true. That's true. That's true. I think I don't know. I wonder. We'll have to keep our eyes and see if it pops up again. But you mentioned that before, and I think you might be right on that one. I think that they. It does seem like it's been forgotten.
But the thing is, like, Jin Yong has gone back and revised it several times. Like, surely he would have noticed the whole thing about the poison manual.
Well, this I think we're on the second revision, and so maybe the third revision deals with that very issue. Who knows? But I do feel like there's also a little bit of, well, this is a super lethal venom that can be dealt with by this antidote. But if it happens on a Tuesday between noon and 3, then nope, there's nothing you can do. So it's that kind of which I don't know. It's one of the things I kind of like about the genre, because you'll get these moments where characters will say, he's been affected by this, but today is such and such a day, so therefore,
moon, and,
yeah. So I think there's a lot of wiggle room, is what it boils down to. But again, the thing that's very striking here is sort of Guo Fu's just terrible personality.
And I gotta say, also what's important for me this chapter is that the fact that Wu brothers each found someone who's better looking than Guo Fu, I believe, and with a much better personality. So it was the Wang Yan Ping and Ye Lu Yan, right?
Yeah, no. I believe that's correct.
Yeah. I don't remember which brother's chasing which which woman.
And Guo Fu even, she pairs up with Yellow Chi, which I thought was good because he's kind of like not a proto, but he's sort of in the image of Guo Jing. He's sort of when he first shows up to the last chapter, he rescues, or maybe it's the next chapter actually. I think it is the next chapter, so I'll zip it for right now. But
I don't think Guo Fu deserves Ye Lu Chi. Ye Lu Chi's been a bro the whole time that we've sort of known of him.
Oh wait, no, it is this chapter.
Yeah.
Because what happened was she found them all fighting with Gong Sun Ji, the former master of Passionless Valley, and he's up to sort of his old antics, and he just really likes kidnapping pretty young women, I think. So he ends up grabbing Guo Jing and Wan Yan Ping and threatening to squeeze them to death. And I think that's the moment when Yellow Chi arrives and fires his arrows, and Huang Rong at first mistakes him for Guo Jing, and then realizes, oh no, it's the archery's not good enough to be Guo Jing.
Because it was a Mongolian style of firing, apparently. Yeah.
Well, that's where Guo Jing got it. Was But his is just spectacular. He's like he's able to sort of kill two hawks with a single arrow. Two eagles. But everybody's getting paired up, and
I just don't think Guo Fu deserves to have her own romance after stringing along the Wu brothers for so long, and I just think it's really good that because I think I mentioned this last time as well. I just couldn't understand why the Wu brothers were so obsessed with Guo Fu, and it's actually explained very well here because she was the only girl on the island of a young age, and she was pretty decent looking. The Wu brothers, like as I mentioned before, like the people in this time seem very low EQ.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because they were trapped on an island with nobody else around except old
Yeah.
people and one young woman who was decent looking. It's sort
Yeah,
of
no, it made perfect
understand.
sense when they explained it. I thought that was a perfect description, and because you do
Yeah,
have that thought, you're like, why are they so stuck on her? But then you realize, yeah, that's like their only exposure to like a viable mate is her, uh, and there's like nobody else on the island. So, just to like you said, like like some eccentric people that uh, uh, you know, what is it like the flying bat and when Huang Yaoshi decides to show up, maybe. And other than that, you have Guo Jing or Huang Rong to deal with. And can you hear me? Okay.
yeah, you're just breaking up a little bit on my end. I don't know if it's okay. If it's okay in your end, then that's fine. But it's
I
just
think it's okay on my end, but
okay.
hopefully it doesn't sound too bad. How's it sounding right now?
It's fine because you're recording on your end. If it's blocking on my end, that's perfectly no issue there. So.
Okay. All right. But yeah, so I forget where we were. Oh yeah, but I would agree with you. She is just an uh, I don't know, just a
A nasty person, I'd say.
yeah, yeah. And you know what?
Or
I should say we're actually I made a mistake. We are talking about chapter 28 and 29 at the same time because I kind of skipped over. Uh, it's not a big deal because we're covering the same ground, but we're technically deep into chapter 29, Ultimate Disasters. Um, but I would agree with you that she is. I don't know, just like she cut off his arm, and it's like, well, I said sorry. What do you want? She's like the ultimate, like you could sort of picture her as like, she's a very modern brat is how I would describe her. Like just a very sort of, very deliberately done, obviously, but you're not
yeah,
meant to enjoy her as a character, but just her inability to understand any of her own failings is staggering. And then the fact that she does it again, she ruins Yangor's life by cutting off his arm, and then she ruins it more by poisoning him and his new bride, so that the new bride is definitely gonna die in the next 3 days. Then she's like, "Well, what do you want? Like I thought you were Lee Mocho." Like she has no sense of the consequences of her own actions. Um, and
and
she act
you can pin that wholly on Huang Rong as well. I think it's because she sheltered her so much from everything, despite the fact that Huang Rong as a teen or as a youngster was pretty rebellious. She ran away from home to play as a beggar, right? And that's how she met Guo Jing ultimately, by roaming the world and relying on her own wits to stay out of trouble and stuff. And where was that when it came to Guo Fu?
Well, I think
No?
I think one of the lessons, not one of the lessons, but one of the points in this book is that parenting is actually sort of important to how the characters develop, and so
Yeah.
under different circumstances, Guofu might have ended up a very different character, and I think the same would be said for Huang Rong. At certain points, you wonder: are we getting glimpses of what could have happened to Huang Rong via Li Mochu? Because I think they're roughly the same age, and there's a couple of points where I think they're mistaken for each other. I know at least at one point Guofu mistakes Li Mocho for her mother, um, and so sometimes I kind of wonder, well, maybe what would have happened if Guo Jing had uh, married the Mongolian princess? Would Huang Rong have become sort of like a great evil like Li Mochu? Uh, and because their backstories in a way there's sort of a similarity there, but
And I think Horror would be a much more competent villain
yeah, I would agree.
because she knows all these little tricks and she understands formations and Taoist magic, or what do they say, like they're sort of like mystic formations where you put pile of rocks and then suddenly you can mislead anyone in the middle. And she knows kung fu from Peach Blossom Island. She's the leader of the beggar sect. Like she could cause so much trouble with her influence in that way.
No, she would make a tremendous villain. She would be a very formidable evil character in a story like this. Um, But yeah, and so by the end of this chapter, I think one of my big takeaways is there's 2 points where Guofu mistakes people. The first one is where she thinks Yanguo is Li Mochu, and the next one is she mistakes Li Mochu for her Wang Rong. And I think the point of that is she's not able to sort of see the difference between good and evil. I feel like it's a little bit too heavy-handed for it to not be something like that, especially with all the stuff that she's doing, all the sort of mistakes that she's making.
I guess to me, it's not so much like a differentiation between like good and evil, so much as she doesn't think for herself, really. Yeah, she sees. Well, I mean, she makes lots of assumptions, and she sort of like Yang Guo as well is stubborn in the way that once she's sort of identified the path, like she will go for it. Like, oh, she thinks that's my mom. That's definitely my mom. Who else could it be? I mean, otherwise I wouldn't have thought it was my mom, right? Yep,
Yeah.
hi mom. No, oh wait, no, you're not my mom.
There's no self-reflection at all with her. She's very,
No.
I don't know. She just does not. She's just acting like people should be thankful that she hasn't killed them already. In a way, she's like a hair away from being a Li Mochu if you pushed her in the right direction, you know. But by the end of the chapter, Yanguo still ends up saving her because she ends up mistaking Li Mochu for her mother, and Li Mochu freezes her acupoint, and I think she's about to be burned to death or something by the fire, and Yanguo smacks her into a river, and at the
only after Xiaolong Lu, only after Xiaolong Lu asked him to.
Well, again, this is, I think, something that heroes kind of do in these stories. Guo Jing sort of listened to what Huang Rong told him to do at times like that, and I think Yang Guo is sort of similar, where he kind of listens to Xiaolong Nu. And it's interesting. There are a number of points in these chapters where she tells them to do things, you know, like when he first reconnects with her at Chuanzhen sect and there's that battle, she says, like, you know, tell them to go away. And then, you know, the same thing when they're in the tomb, she's like, tell these people to go away, Yango, so that we can just be together. And
it's funny because I think Xiaolong Lu herself points out at some point that after they got married, Yang Guo was more assertive with her, like telling her to do things rather than just purely listening. So, you know, despite the fact that Xiaolong Lu is still sort of commanding Yang Guo around, like Yang Guo is also reciprocating it by telling her what to do, and she's also listening as well. So.
No, that's true. And I think he's maturing
there.
too. I think he's maturing. I think the marriage is sort of part of the maturing process for him. But yeah, I don't know. I just and also, you know, it's well, we can get into this later. At some point, remind me. I want to talk about Zhu Batong and Xiaolong Nu. I think there's some interesting points of comparison there. But the next chapter is the last chapter because we sort of combined 28 and 29 into one discussion. And that's Strange Encounters. And this is I know this is a pretty cool chapter. They end up at the end of the last chapter. They Xiaolong Nu and Yang Guo leave Ancient Tomb Sect, and they find a cabin in the woods, basically. And at the cabin, they have an encounter with 2 beggars and then 2 monks. And one of the monks turns out to be the former chief of Iron Palm Sect, now Monk Chien. And the other monk is Reverend Yi Dang, the Emperor Duan character. And we also see Elder Peng here, another sort of old scheming character. He's one of the 2 beggars that they first meet. And Elder Peng convinces Monk Chien to unintentionally kill somebody who's buried under the snow. And you know, the backstory here being that Chien has been spending the past several years repenting for all of his serious sins. We're going to talk about some of his sins in the next podcast that we're about to do. But he's a really terrible person that's trying to become a good Buddhist. And Elder Peng is trying to undermine him with his little hypnosis technique. I think it's his soul-absorbing technique that he uses. And I'm trying to remember what happened after that. So then there's a struggle over Chien's soul, basically. That's sort of this extended sequence where he is he sort of he kills this guy, and then he kills Elder Peng, and then he's like, I've killed people, I might as well just go all the way and keep killing. And he's about to kill, they now call them the Yang Long couple, and he's about to kill them. And Reverend Yi Dang tries to intercede, and eventually they bring him down. He calms down, and Yi Dang explains that he is coming because he received a message from I think from his from Scholar, right, from the Scholar character, his old disciple.
Yeah. No, it wasn't Scholar. It was. Oh, was it the Scholar or was it the Indian farmers?
I think it was both of them. I think it was the Indian
Yeah.
and the Scholar. I could be wrong, but he received a message from his disciples and is going to Passionless Valley. And he gives Zhao Longnu an egg with a pill in it, like a porcelain egg, and the pill will stave off the effects of what's ailing her for the next 7 days. So she's got at least 7 days now. And along the way, they bump into Zhu Batong, and they have this lightness kung fu competition. And then they reach Passionless Valley, where they find two groups of women fighting. There's Li Mochu and Hong Lingbo fighting Cheng Ying and Lu Wushuang, and they're stuck amid a bunch of passionless flower thickets, and Li Mochu ends up killing Hong Lingbo, her disciple, in order to get out of the thickets, and then gets poisoned herself. And they chase Li Mochu. She gets away for a time, and then they everybody, the whole big retinue, sort of goes and has an audience with Chi Chan Chi, the really despicable old lady with the date seed spitting.
Yeah.
And now she's got the iron date seeds. She's had them fashioned from bits of iron now. And there's a reunion between her and her brother, and ultimately she says she's not going to give Yanguo the antidote because she's only reserving it for her son-in-law. And Lu decides to pretend to be angry at Yanguo, spits a seed at him. The seed contains a message that says she's going to get him the antidote, and she knows where his companions are, and they're in the fire kiln room. And again, there's a lot of stuff that I'm glossing over, but that's sort of the general arc of the chapter. So I know, what did you think of the last chapter?
I thought it was pretty interesting. By this point, then Yang Guo will have met all of the greats, right? Of the four greats, other than five greats, but other than Wang Chungyang, right? So, but Zhou Botong is supposed to take the part of Wang Chungyang, right, for the five greats.
I have to look it up. I can't remember off the top of my head.
But from this chapter on, like he's met all of the legends of yesteryear, and even Tien or Chiu, I can't remember his name, Chiu, Chiu Chanchi, yeah. Oh no, that's not the one. Chiu Chanchi's the.
That's the old lady. She's the.
Yeah. I can't remember what.
Who are you thinking of?
Tien's name before he
Chi Chanren, I think.
Oh, Chiu Changren. Yeah. Yeah, and it's sort of like he's also a legend in his own right back in the day as well. So like all of these legendary people have now sort of met with Yang Guo, and they're all having their own different interactions with him, which I find that's really interesting. And the sort of it's interesting because I only know of Chiu Chanren from the movies we watch and from snippets of series I've seen and stuff. Like he's not a good person, and seeing him going through this sort of redemption arc is a little bit strange for me, but I find it quite compelling. It's just because the whole Yideng is using his own body as a sort of a way to temper Tien and get rid of his inner demons by not retaliating when Tien is sort of fighting him, and hoping to sort of cleanse him of his inner demons by using his own life as the price there. It sort of really shows how Yideng is sort of quite saintly as far as characters go, to be honest.
Yeah, and he definitely is. And I mean, it's and I love how grueling the process is. It's not just sort of like he he has this quick sort of path where he's he sees the errors of his ways, or he see because there's a moment where he realizes, because Yangor is defeating him, how terrible it is to be beaten by somebody, and it's sort of I think he starts getting a sense of empathy, but even then it's still kind of temporary. It's not a permanent trend. It's gonna and it kind of, to me, it kind of harkens back to Monkey King, like the like that style of sort of, it's going to take a while to sort of bring you full circle here. And again, like you said, he's a terrible person. I mean, he's done, this is a guy who has killed a baby in cold blood with his iron palm technique. He's just a
technically, you could say he wasn't the one that killed the baby, right?
Okay, okay. Let's just say this: he iron palm techniqued a baby in its crib. I think whether the baby died or not, and whether it was his fault, that's almost a separate issue. But the the level, and he was scheming with the djinn and doing all kinds of terrible things, and so he's just not a good guy. And but now he's sort of having he's having sort of a second chance here at becoming a better person. And it's interesting too, because his sect used to be a good sect before it got corrupted under his management. So it's kind of appropriate. And
it's funny as well, because it's like a parallel between him and Nemo Cho a little bit, I feel, just in terms of the way the sort of atrocities they commit. Like, Nemo Cho has definitely killed babies, and the mother too, while we're at it.
Yeah, that's true. She has.
And she's done her more than her fair share of like bad things. So, assuming we don't know anything about how the story's going to end, like we sort of get a sort of spark that might imply that she also might have a redemption arc at some point. She might become a nun or whatever. It's a possibility for her. Like, if Chill Chanren can do it, then Nemo Cho surely should be allowed to also have her own redemption arc type of thing.
And well, I mean, I think with Lee Mochu, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about where she goes with her story. But we won't get into that until we get there. But yeah, I think at this point in the story, you could sort of wonder that, because you would. In fact, I think when I first encountered it in a television series, at this stage, I was very much rooting for Lee Mochu to become like at least one of the group. Do you know what I mean? I mean, obviously, by the time she kills Hong Lingbo, things start falling apart pretty rapidly there. But but up until that point, even up through her fight in Ancient Tomb Sect, you still sort of feel like maybe there's like a chance she could come back and then when you like you said, when you see Chien, you think, oh well, if he can do it, then maybe she can do it. But I think that message is really more for Yangua than anybody else. I think that he is the one who is sort of I don't know what's going on with him. He's kind of synthesizing all of these lessons and becoming his own thing in an interesting way. But it's interesting to watch him sort of reconcile all this stuff. So I don't know. I think what do you think so far? What do you think of the third book in general, or where we are? Any additional thoughts before we head out and get ready for the other podcast?
No, it's just like, it feels like every time we have a podcast, I always say this, but these are five very eventful chapters. But
Yeah.
I mean, every chapter seems to be eventful. It has it's obviously impossible for us to cover every point. There's lots of little subtleties that you can only really get by reading it. And even then, because it's a translation, sometimes it's probably we're probably still missing a little piece of the puzzle sometimes. Like, I feel like the passages that Dooku inscribed on the rocks would probably have been a lot more majestic and even more imposing sounding than it would have been in the English translation. Yeah. And
well, the other thing that gets lost in translation is, is this supposed to be funny, or is this not supposed to be funny? And sometimes you don't know what the tone is supposed to be for something. And so I find that my response to that is to be very cautious and like say, okay, I shouldn't assume that this is meant to be silly. Maybe the translation was just sort of funky. And so that's something that happens. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's like the scene with Huang Rong and Nemo Cho fighting over the baby. I thought was a bit funny, and but I was like, oh, this is I'm not really sure because Huang Rong is, feinting these lethal attacks at her baby to try and force Nemo Cho to protect her.
Yeah, because I guess you could almost shade that in different lights depending on, like, you could see it as sort of this funny slapstick thing going on, or this really dire situation where this mother is forced to throw lethal jabs towards her child in order to get her back. I don't know. I tend to read those scenes in a little bit more of a lighter shade, just because overall, I feel like we're getting like a lot of playful banter in the course of it, and I feel like it's there are some things that kind of feel a little bit slapstick. But again, it's hard to tell because, like you said, it's a translation, and I don't necessarily know. So I usually defer to people that have access to the original content if they want to weigh in. But
Yeah,
but
and one last thing I did want to bring up as well was we talked a lot about how Yang Guo's kung fu improved after he sort of obtained the inheritance of Dugu. But Xiaolong Nu's martial arts have also improved a tremendous amount ever since she learnt the left and right hand boxing
yeah,
from Double Tongue. Like she held her own against the whole Mongolian horde as well as the elders from the Transcend sect for a brief while. She did get injured in the end, obviously,
well,
because her internal energy was weak. But
and they went into seclusion specifically to deal with her and Yangua's techniques, and they come out and they're like, oh, like there's she's improved. It was totally useless for us to go into seclusion, and it's a very funny moment because it's this big dramatic thing. They've been in seclusion, and it's like this, that they're in seclusion. They've been there and doing it's been sort of building in the background.
And they're
And
like, "Oh, we have a new formation we
yeah,
can use to defeat their conjoined swordplay," and then she can use it by herself, apparently.
so yeah, it's very funny. Well, I think next episode I'd like to talk about Zhu Batong and Zhao Longnu because I feel like there's some parallels of personality in terms of, I don't know what you call it, innocence or just a lack of awareness of social things that like they both seem to be missing some of these uh like Zhao Longnu's been living in a tomb her whole life, so he just has not experienced normal life, and Zhu Batong is like in his own planet. So
He's a different, like Double Tongue. I sincerely think that he is an example of someone with autism
hmm,
like this is like full on the far end of the spectrum type of
hmm,
autism, and based on like what I've seen from Brave Archer as well, he definitely seems like like he has some degree of autism there, and I think Shaolin is slightly different. Shaolin was raised in the tomb, so it makes more sense for her to not be able to interact with people properly until she can learn. So like there's still the opportunity for her to learn
yeah,
and
yeah.
possibly change, but with Double Tongue, I don't think that
No,
possibility has never even.
no, he's not going to change. He's sort of that's sort of him,
Yeah.
and I think that's just his personality. Um, but I think what I find interesting is they both have sort of it produces a similar flaw for both of them when they're dealing with the martial world. And Zhao Longnu can probably get away with it a little bit more because she's a little more graceful than Zhu Batong, and a great beauty. And Zhu Batong's an
Yeah,
old man.
that always helps.
Yeah. So
An old man who likes to take his pants off and be like, I haven't
yeah,
got all your items.
yeah. I'm pure as the day I was born, and but yeah, I guess it's yeah. The even when they have different strengths that they can draw on, but again, I think it's still sort of I think it's interesting because they do sort of end up kind of connecting. Do you know what I mean? They do have sort of like a connection that I think makes sense because of they sort of both kind of approach the world in similar ways. And so, though she's obviously much more serious than he is, like he is just off the wall, prankster, funny man, and I don't think Zhao Longnu has ever even told a joke or understood a joke in her entire life.
Yeah.
And so I don't think she would understand the point of a joke. But it is interesting to see her getting more emotion as the, she's still sort of, her whole training is based around, sort of suppressing emotion, but she's getting, she is having more regular, normal human emotions now that she's, fallen in love with Yango, and she's had exposure to the world and seen some of its sufferings.
And stuff with herself as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. But we're gonna unfortunately have to end it here because we have another podcast that we need to do, and we need to have time to recover and get ready before it. So we'll be back on next week with the next 5 chapters. We just got 2 more weeks, 2 more episodes of Return of Condor Heroes. Definitely, I think both of us would encourage people to go and check out. You can go to places online and find various fan translations. We're using the one by Noodles. It's a really good story. You could start at Legend of Condor Heroes if you want. There's a new translation of that available officially in print, the first book at least, and there are the other books are available in fan translation. The whole trilogy, including Heaven Sword, Dragon Saber, is very entertaining. And I think, I don't know, I feel like this is a really good overview if somebody kind of wants to know really what the genre is about and maybe has just seen the movies. This would be a good entry point. So I don't know, any additional thoughts, Kenny, before we head out?
Yeah, I'm good for now.
All right, so we will see you next week, and we will be up in a few minutes with Brave Archer 3.